All right, folks, we will get going. So welcome to INF104. This is the HCL Domino AppDevPack, future of Domino AppDev that nobody knows about. Maybe we'll rephrase that just a little tiny bit and say that it's the future of Domino AppDev that nobody's talking about. And that's probably the main goal that Heiko and I have for this presentation, is to get people talking about it, get more interest in it, and get people using it. So Heiko showed the sponsor slide there. We'll say thank you very much to all of our sponsors. And I also want to throw a quick thank you out to all of the organizers of CollabSphere too, because I know everybody's been doing a heck of a job putting in lots of time to pull this thing off. And I think it's really valuable for the community. So thank you to everyone, sponsors and volunteers. Quick slide here about C3UG. We can pass right through this. You can go back to the slide deck and download it if you want to look into more there, but that's where Heiko, myself, and our colleague Colin do a lot of sharing of this information, both on YouTube and on our blogs on our main site. And the next couple slides are just about me and Heiko. And again, you can come back and read that. As I said before, we got lots of content to get through, so let's just forge right ahead. Over to you, Heiko.
Okay, so just about a couple of slides about me. It's the same thing applies that Graham already mentioned. We have lots of content today in a very short time, so we just want to plow ahead, and you can look all the information about us. You can look that up later. The slides are already available. I saw that at the CollabSphere live session database, so you should be able to read that if needed later on. So let's hurry on. Let's get on to it with the agenda. So what's in store for you today? What have you planned for you? For those of you who are not familiar with the Domino AppDevPack, we will give you a short overview of what's included in the AppDevPack, so what are the components and all of that. And then we go a little bit about how it is positioned currently from a development tooling perspective, and Graham will share a little bit of our ugly duckling blues that we both have sometimes, and we'll utter about it. So we'll just like to share some of this with you, and then we will get more into the constructive mode and show you what can you do with the AppDevPack. So how can you use it? What are the basic basic knowledge that you need to have to work with it, and we'll try to also tell you or share a little bit of our positioning of where it positions itself amongst all the other AppDev tools that we have at stake. And then it's time for demos and code. We promised some demos and some code, and we'll have a couple of those things as well, and we'll finish it up. And without any further delay, what is the AppDevPack? And I think if you look at it from an outside point of view, and that's what it's entitled for, it opens up Domino to the world of Node.js development, and now with the latest incarnation for Java as well. And the big difference between all the other development environments that we have to our disposal is this is an external one. So it is implied to be an interface from an outside component talking to Domino, which means like for Node.js as a separate implementation, it talks to Node.js or using Node.js to Domino. So it's not an integral part inside of Domino. A couple of components are, but the programming that you do with the DominoDB language binding for the JavaScript or Java happens outside of the Domino container at some point. To do that, we need a separate module that gets installed into the Domino server, which is the Proton task, which is a server admin task that you install. And this is actually the component that talks using the gRPC protocol from Google that talks to the Java implementation and the JavaScript implementation. From a positioning point of view, the AppDevPack clearly is a pro-code tool. This has nothing to do with low or no-code efforts like Vault, for example. So this is something for the hardcore development guys in the Java world or the Node.js world. What's the current release of the AppDevPack and what are the components? Current release is 106 from October 2020, so fairly accurate and current from our perspective. As I mentioned, the AppDevPack comes with a couple of modules. One of them is the Proton add-in for the Domino server. And then now we have two language bindings, the Java version, which hit 1.0.0 with this last release, and the JavaScript bindings, which are a little bit older, a little bit further ahead. Important to know, on almost all the important parts, there's a parity of features between the two language bindings, except for one thing, the first incarnation of handling design elements through the AppDevPack made its way into the JavaScript implementation, which is the DXL database export feature, which is currently not available in Java. But that's the only thing. Everything else, like handling rich text and handling attachments, documents, and so forth, is all available on the same service. And an additional component that is part of the Domino AppDevPack is the IAM service. The IAM service is an OAuth authentication server that talks to Domino through DominoDB to Domino and allows authentication and personalized access to your Domino data. We've seen a lot of documentation improvements in the latest release. So right now, I would consider the documentation as workable. We're not there yet where I would like it to see, but it's a heck of a lot better than in the first couple of iterations that we have seen. Nevertheless, a couple of things from my perspective are missing currently, even in 106. It's still a big hurdle for newcomers to get into the coding with the AppDevPack, because the round trip sample code that's available, that from my perspective would be helpful to have it available, is not really there. There's a couple of code segments in the documentation, but you still need a fair amount of knowledge to work with these when you start from scratch. And that's relating to our Ugly Duckling Blues, the marketing of the product and the messages from the love that it should receive from our perspective, from the offering management. The HCL is lacking from my perspective big time, because the product from my perspective is really great, offers a lot of potential, and some other initiatives get, for good reasons, get some more airtime, and we would be happy to see more airtime for this thing. Graham, over to you then.
Right, so as you were talking there, my screen just came up and said my internet connection is unstable, so if you lose me, maybe give me a wave or something, and I'll know that I've dropped off. So why is it important? Well, you know, it gives you the flexibility to build apps how you want, and of course, those of us that have been around the Notes Domino community for a long time will say, well, we pretty much have that now. But you know, we all know that we got to kind of navigate around the landscape in order to make certain things work better. This simply opens us up to the world of application development outside of Domino, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because we got to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, which is challenging in the day and age of too many things to do and not enough resources and not enough time and so on. But the bottom line is that you can build enterprise apps without having to move your data off of Domino. So we all have been facing the challenges, whether we're customers or business partners or HCL, of people deciding they don't want to use Domino anymore because there's the latest, you know, whatever whiz-bang tool that's down the street. And we all know that there's massive amounts of business logic inside Domino applications. There's an equal investment in the security and the data structure and all of the stuff that we've got on the Domino server. So if somebody's coming to you and making a very loud argument about wanting to build on Azure or AWS or all these cool things with Node.js, you can say, we can do that, but we can still keep all of our stuff in Domino. The bottom line is, I think as we all look around the Notes and Domino community, you know, we're all kind of heading in the direction of me here with not so much, and whatever hair I have is gray. Young kids coming off the street can basically sit down and start working with these tools, and it's already stuff that they've received the education in their college training for. So you can get them up to speed fairly quickly without having to go through a long process of having to learn new technology. The neat thing about the AppDevPack is that it's a task like any other task on your Domino server, where it just wakes up and runs and is reliable and solid and not very flashy. It just works. So that's important. You know, if you think about it from a maintenance standpoint, it's something that once you've got installed and configured, and it takes a little bit of work to do that, but not a huge amount, it just works, and it's something that you can rely on. So The bottom, at the end of it, the last point here is taking advantage of all the new stuff that we've got in Node and Java. Certainly XPages open that door to us, but this just opens it that much more. So it's a wonderful investment. We're seeing quarterly updates to the AppDevPack. There's just so much that you can do with it. So that's why we feel like it's important. So what's the ugly duckling blues about? Well, as we said, it's just not getting the fanfare. It's not getting, people aren't talking about it the way that we think that people should be talking about it. It is a solid tool. Now, we will hear more about Project Keep, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that seems to be where there's where there's attention and where there's fanfare, which is frustrating because this tool works. It really does work, and I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why. It's bottom line is we want you to pay attention to it. We want to be talking about it. The more people talk about it, the less it's going to be an ugly ducking. But what are the things, what are the barriers to entry? So yeah, we're learning new technology again, whether it's having to pay attention to new UI frameworks like React and Vue and whatever, the world of OAuth and IAM. Granted, it's relatively complex to those of us that have been working in the Domino world and have just relied on the fact that we've got solid Domino security that we can understand and haven't had to relearn. So there's some uphill that you got to do in order to get there, but you can take it in chunks. We'll come back to this in a little bit. As I said here, leveraging the steps that we took in XPages, of course, the argument for XPages way back when was that it's much more modern in terms of web development frameworks. Well, this has just gone that much further. So the stuff that we learned already in terms of how we've built XPages or learned to build XPages applies here. We can take advantage of this stuff. Things like CSS and HTML and JSON and XML and all the standard stuff. This still applies. And the most important thing that we want to leave you with here is that there's nothing to be afraid of. It is something that you can learn.
Yeah, let me add one sentence to the nothing to be afraid of. We heard the argument a couple of times that you need to install something separately, like an Node.js implementation and stuff like that. Bear in mind that when you learn all of this part, then you will still rely on everything that you know from Domino. So a lot of the stuff that you know from the Domino development side still applies to everything that's in the AppDevPack. But you learn a lot of new stuff that's relevant out in the market. So using the AppDevPack gives you the chance to not building something proprietary, but building something with tool sets that are out and proven in the market for a long, long time. Being it the JavaScript Node.js implementation, being it the Java implementation, being it all the fancy front-end technologies that are available out there. So you can be, as a developer, with this, you can be part of a much bigger family of tools and opportunities that are out there. So there's really nothing to be afraid of. I'm thinking it is a great opportunity as well to really open your portfolio up and do stuff with Domino that we have barely been able to do before with that ease and simplicity. Okay,
this is the fun slide. Feel free to screenshot this thing and tweet it out. But it's basically a kind of a review of what we've got for AppDev tools. So the dark blue bubbles are pro code tools. The light blue bubbles are low code tools. The purple bubbles are the development tools that we can use, the platforms that we can use to build stuff. And then we'll come to Project Keep in a sec. So if we start from the right and go to the left, this is kind of talking about what's in market, what's popular, what's being used, what's being invested in. And of course, app functions and LotusScript have been around the longest and really for the longest time with IBM fell into the aged capabilities category. But of course, with V10 and the investment that HCL has made in the product, specifically around Nomad, that's essentially revitalized LotusScript and app functions, and we're starting to see additional investment there. Not a huge amount, but that's fair. It's just us saying that these are tools that have been around for a long time. We're comfortable with them, but we're not seeing huge new investment in them. Of course, we all know the XPages story, and the key reason we put XPages on the curve where we put it is the amount of investment that it's received in a long time. So HCL is supporting XPages, people are using XPages, but it's not seeing the new development that we think a product like this should see. Of course, Java stands on its own up there, probably the most, if you ask a lot of people, and Jesse Gallagher's at the front of that list. Java is going to be the key tool that you can use to build your pro-code applications in the Domino world. Coming all the way over to the early part of the curve here on the left-hand side, of course, the AppDevPack is one of the things that has been new, that is receiving investment. Certainly, we know the Volt story. And the interesting thing for me about Volt is it feels like, Volt certainly is getting fanfare as a low-code tool. The presentations that I've seen and the conversations that have happened lately about Volt, it seems like it's almost trying to be forced to be a pro-code tool. And it's an interesting story that I'm interested to hear more about from HCL in terms of kind of the right placement for where it is. But as far as we're concerned, the AppDevPack is the place to be with respect to pro-code development in the Domino world. Project Keep sitting off to the side. One of the important things to understand, I'm not sure this has been positioned properly. It seems to be positioned as a product that is imminently available in Domino or coming or whatever. Project Keep is the HCL Labs program where a bunch of really smart people are off playing with ideas and concepts and coming up with things that are going to make our lives easier. But these are not imminently going to be thrown into the application, or not thrown is the wrong word I'm using there, imminently available to us in Domino. Great concepts planned for the future, but not necessarily something that you can use today. They're going to be coming at some point in the future, and this is going to be an ongoing series of tools and products that we're going to be able to take advantage of in Domino. But the point is, the AppDevPack is available today and is the thing that you can start using right now. Going back to VS Code and Domino Designer, probably there's some people who want me to push Domino Designer all the way completely off to the other end of the slide here as a tool that they don't want to use anymore, and that's fair, right? It's fair criticism. Domino Designer has warts, and interestingly enough, it seems to work for me, not that bad. But anyway, VS Code is where people want to live today, right? VS Code is a really stable, strong tool that is universal, that we can use for a whole bunch of different things. And in fact, Heiko is going to show us his code in VS Code. So it's the place where we want to live. And I've been part of presentations where Jason Gary's talked about VS Code as being the place that we want to go to build our applications in Domino. So some things to think about, right? But the main point is that there's those two green sections of Domino that are kind of devoid, and we're saying, look, for the tool to grow and prosper, we need to move some more tools in there. The AppDevPack is on its way there. I would argue also that Volt is on its way there, given the investment that's happened. But those are the two things that we can use right now that we want to see additional investment in to be able to build our applications. Obviously, looking forward to seeing what's going to come in Digital Week in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, we get some more stuff to talk about there. So, all right, let's move along. How can I use the AppDevPack? We'll go through this real quick. Again, we talked about the fact that Proton is installed in Domino. That's where our data lives. The middle blue section, I put down Model View Controller for people who understand what that paradigm is, right? We separate our data from our business logic from our front end. So the green box is your front end stuff. You're going to build that in some JavaScript or Java front end development tool. The middleware, your controller section, that's where you're going to do your APIs, and Heiko's going to show us what that code looks like. But you're using Node.js to build that, or Java. Though the blue box and the green box, you could run it on your Domino server. Arguably, you wouldn't do that. This is where you get into the world of Azure and AWS if you wanted to, or other hosted servers, where you run your Node.js applications on a different server, but through REST calls, you can actually talk to your Domino server securely. So you can now start to separate where your data lives from where your business logic lives from where your front end lives. They could be on three separate boxes if you wanted to do it like that. Let's move on. We want to talk about demos here. So, is this you?
Yeah. Well,
actually, this more or less repeats what we just said.
Yeah. Right. So let's skim over this. And it describes a little bit of what we want to see in the demos. We start with the middleware API, and as Graham mentioned, or as I think we mentioned a couple of times now, the AppDevPack is kind of agnostic what you do here with your middleware. REST APIs is currently the most the most used interface to talk to that you would build in a middleware. But you can do other things with it as well. You can build real-time interfaces. You can build streaming interfaces. The AppDevPack is agnostic on how you talk to it. So you have all the opportunities that you need to build out your middleware in the way that you and your application needs it for your current use case. And of course, DominoDB just offers everything that you have available on Domino to you with that. A couple of things, because this usually is for a lot of the people coming from classical Domino development, this piece of the AppDevPack causes most of the problems that I see out there when we look at implementation so far. This is IAM and the concept of how we transfer authenticated user access to our Domino data is through the AppDevPack. It's about configuring the IAM service and all the necessary token handling and SSL handling and stuff, which makes it a bit complicated. But this is also something that we as the Domino community have not been exposed to for a pretty long time, because Domino really takes care of all of this for us in most of the cases. But in the Node.js world or in the Java world, this is something that's more or less basic for those people coming from those environments. So that's not shocking to them at all. And again, the implementation that we see here is the basic OAuth industry standard. So there's nothing special to it. There's nothing special AppDevPack about it. Simply the data connector that hosts like session data and token data and stuff like that is pointing to Domino, of course. But that's basically the only thing that is not a basic OAuth 2 standard implementation in the IAM service. So this also is a different way. So it tells you a little bit on where the AppDevPack also is targeted. It's not only targeted for Domino developers making their way out of this, out of the Nodes client into something like single-page application, but it's also for people from the outside coming into our Domino community and attracting other people that are busy in other segments of the industry to just hold them back into that and giving them the opportunity to have Domino as a nice citizen playing with their applications. Okay, so that's for the theory part. It's like let's shift gears a little bit and go into the demo. So I prepared 4 demos for you today, and I just want to show you those around here. The first thing is a basic implementation of how we're talking about building APIs and middlewares with the AppDevPack that are usable as kind of a REST API that can talk to Domino and would be the starting point for any front-end application that uses them later on. I will give you a quick example on that. It's a JavaScript example. I will then dive into some of the features that are available from the Java bindings. And the other 2 examples are built. One, the adaptive card sample, was built by a colleague of mine, Dirk Pöschke, who's integrated this into our homepage. And I found it an interesting concept. That's why we tried it out. It should illustrate a little bit of how you can use the AppDevPack in conjunction with your existing applications, being it XPages or something else, to integrate new and emerging technologies that are popping up. And adaptive cards, I will go through this in a minute, is one of them that I would like to see. And then the other thing is, for number 4, is a full-fledged React front-end application that renders Domino data in a Kanban board. And we'll just go through this as a sample on what you can build using this technology and this tool set at your hand in your hands. So this is more or less like a full-featured application demo for what it's good for. Okay, let's get started with demo number 1. This is the API and the AppDev, an API they've built. We did mention it before, but for those of you who are trying to learn about the AppDevPack, C3UG has posted a free online course about setting up the AppDevPack and getting your feet wet in coding with it. This is the first course that we have been working on, and currently we're in the making of the second phase of the course, which focuses on exactly the missing parts, like how do I build a REST API as a middleware, and how do I build a front-end application that talks to Domino. So this will be the next module here, and one of the samples that we started out with, and you see the repo down there, is a REST API that just does a couple of implementation patterns that we see emerging in the AppDev world. You should now see VS Code from my side. Is that big enough, or should I just make it a little bit bigger from a code perspective? Hopefully this works for you. So basically, this is the basic construct of what we have. So this is an API server that is based on Node.js and Express as an Express middleware. So this is a very commonly used HTTP server, application server component in Node.js. And what we've built here is a basic server implementation that starts up an HTTPS server and exposes a REST API. This REST API is defined as so-called routes in in Express. So these are our endpoints that we define for the API. So this is a separate module that we import into the Express application that handles all the calling from a client that calls the API. We'll call it like with one of these methods, and this would map to a controller implementation that actually does the business logic. This controller segment is built right here, and this controller simply exposes all the business logic, so to speak, that we need to handle with the API. So, for example, this API works on expense categories. We will be building a expense management application as a sample, and the first incarnation that we came up with was how do we handle expense categories. And this API deals with all of this. So we can get an expense category, we can delete one, we can add a new one, we can update one, and we can get a list of all the expense categories that we have. So this is basically what the controller exposes. It takes the requests that are coming through the web server and then calls the respective code that does the implementation. The implementation, and you see right there, is very small. So this is actually everything, all the code that I need to get an expense category, to load it and get the JSON data back to work within my front-end application. That's considered the case because we work with a so-called data model and a schema that goes with it. This data model is a separate JavaScript class that does prototype implementations. So it basically defines an object with methods and the way and data handling. And this encapsulates all the underlying functions, for example, that talk to DominoDB. So if you, for example, if you want to write something to Domino, this is the method that we would call. And here, for those who have worked with the AppDevPack, this is where we get down to the AppDevPack usage itself. So that's where we expose data to the Domino server. All of the other classes, like the routes, our controller, don't have to be bothered with this because all of our objects encapsulate this and handle it underneath the covers. So this is a pretty nice concept forward. What we also came up with is some schemas that are implemented here, so we can have data sanitation and that going there as well. So this is just for a quick sample of how these applications are constructed. I don't go into any details for the sake of time. What we also implemented, and I just want to show you this, we have a Swagger API documentation for this as well, which we can utilize. So we can authorize a call, for example, and if you want to read out the expense categories that we want to work with, we can execute this statement and write down here in this screen, we can get the Domino data. And if you look at the UNID property, these are the UNIDs from the underlying nodes documents that we have. And with this Swagger interface, we can work, of course, like in every other REST API as well. We can test and try out all the features and functionalities to be exposed. And this can also be part of this application here.
When we release the course, all of this code and everything else is going to be available for download.
Right. So this is a quick overview because this is more or less the basic way how all the other demos build their APIs besides the Java API. So this will be the next one, which is the Java API demo. This is a very quick demo that I want to show you I'll go through in a couple of stages. We will read some documents from an NSF. Then we will use DominoDB in Java to create a new document in the same NSF. And then we will use a feature that I think is very important for the AppDevPack in the Java world and the JavaScript world as well. We use some Lotus script, a Lotus script agent in the same database to interact with the documents that we have been building, and also create new documents and work with that. So this lets you basically reuse code that you already have available in your environment. So this is just a basic class that I've built up here, and this up here defines the server connectivity that we want to use. I already set up a couple of breakpoints, so we will go through that quickly. But so let me bring up my Windows box because we need that one. So this is the database that we see right here. This is the to-do management application with currently 6 documents. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to read the documents from this database and just console log it on the debug console here in the Java API. This is a Maven project, by the way. Also, the repo for this is also available for you to check it out, so you can just check out the code for that. So this for example, is what we see right here from an output point of view. These are the 6 documents that we currently saw a minute ago in the nodes database. The next thing that we're going to see is we will create a document in the database, and then we'll wait for that. And we'll check whether this has worked out or not, and this is already done. And if you go back to the nodes database, we should find a new document here. If I refresh this, here it is. This is one of my personal quotes: "The new Star Wars movies are crap," and I hold Disney personally responsible for this. But this is something that more or less relates to my personal taste. So let's head on back to the code and get further on with it. The next section will actually call a Lotus script agent. And this Lotus script agent will use the UNID of the newly document that we created, and will console log on the Domino server console the information that we pasted in, like the responsible and the subject field that we wrote into this new document that we created. This is a Lotus script agent, as I told you, and what you can keep in mind here, which is also something that is notable for everything inside of the AppDevPack. This returns a listenable future object, which means what we can do here is we call this Lotus script agent asynchronously. And this means this is a non-blocking call. So if you have a long running transaction in Lotus script, you can just, for example, free your API by waiting for a promise to get resolved in JavaScript or in one of these future elements in Java. So you have a non-blocking method of calling your existing business logic, whether it be a Java agent or anything in Lotus script that's available through Lotus script script libraries that you can wrap into an agent. And you can also pass in data to this agent to give it a context. So that's what we're going to do next. And this agent will print something to the Domino console and also write a couple of things. So, okay, I should have started the live console before that. No, great. Anyways, if we refresh the page, we see that a couple of more documents got created. So we have a Jean-Luc Picard document, a James D. Kirk, and a James Bond document now. Those got created by the Lotus script agent. You'd have to trust me on that. Sorry about that, but I can show you the code later on if you want. And after this is done, we will just reread, and you see down here, this is the UNID of the document that we created previously. And if I continue now with the code, then we read out all of the documents again, and we find our 6 that we had at the beginning, plus the 4 that we created in here. So this is the code that goes in here. And as you see, this is a way of how you can take advantage of leveraging existing code that you already have, being it Lotus script or being it in Java agents or being in Java components that are available at your disposal on the Domino side, you can reuse those in your AppDevPack document applications. And this, I think, is a very important feature to go to. So GitHub repo is there as well. On to the next demo. Let me check. Okay, I have to hurry up. So I came up with or I came across Microsoft Adaptive Cards for a couple months back. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Adaptive Cards. Adaptive Cards is a new framework that Microsoft issued to build platform agnostic UI components that can run independently from the implementation language on different platforms and different devices. And you can see the list of languages and platforms here besides this chart. And the idea basically is that you build components by JSON definitions, and then you have a rendering JavaScript component, in our case, for example, that renders this UI component for us and gives us hook back into our application to, for example, expose data to the UI and take data from the UI back and do something with it. And that's exactly what we're showing in this demo. So what my colleague Dirk built is a feedback form on our website as an adaptive card component that gets rendered as a in a custom control in an X page. So that's how we deliver the card code and the JavaScript there. And this form gets rendered dynamically, and is based more or less on a simple JSON implementation. And whenever we fill out that form, the data gets sent back through DominoDB to our to a nodes database. So what does that look like? Just to give you a quick example of this, this is on our website, and we have a little box down here where you can get in contact with us. And if I open this one up, what you see right here, this is the adaptive card. And I can just fill it out quickly. And add something to it. And this is, of course, it's CollabSphere 2020. That's what I want to see. And if I send this off, this document gets transferred over to Domino through DominoDB and ends up in a nodes database, which I have on my desktop right here. And that's the document that just came in, right? The cool thing about these adaptive cards is this is a true low-code environment, right? So you can build these adaptive cards using a visual designer. So you can build these interfaces by dragging and dropping components onto a screen, and you get the necessary JSON code more or less generated for you. And then you copy it, do a couple of calls into a JavaScript REST API to serve out those things, and you can run with it. It's very easy, and it's working on literally any platform with any given language that you're used to. Very interesting concept from my perspective, and we can make use of this inside of existing stuff. We can use it inside of a React application. We can use it inside an X page. You can use it even in classical Nodes web development components for that. So it's a pretty cool technology, I think, and a very promising thing. On to the final demo. This is more or less the, should illustrate a little bit of...
Take a drink. Holy smokes. We got lots of questions, so, but yeah, take a drink, and we'll run through all the questions. The chat's been really good, but by all means, people throw your questions in, and we will get to them and answer them for everybody.
Okay. So this one is more or less a complete round-trip demo from what we already told you. So we have built out the REST API. We built a React front end. We have authentication using IAM, so we have personalized access to Domino data, and we read and write Domino data. And we will not only read and write Domino data, but we will also build a new way of rendering this data and interacting with it. And that's the Kanban board demo. So let me switch over to that one and go through that. Close those two. Let me, oh, Jesus. Come back. Okay, let me start off by this. This is my SIT web desktop, so to speak, application, and I have to authenticate first. That's what I'm told you. This is just for the sake of this demo, we just leave the IAM interface as it is. It comes from HCL. So you see, this is IAM that we authenticate against. Now I'm into the application, and what you see right here there's a couple of things happening underneath the covers. So this line, the second line with all applications, or the Anwendungen in German, this is a list of applications that are available to me. So all of these icons and chiclets that you see down here are separate nodes applications that have been rebuilt within this desktop. And they have not have been rebuilt, but they have been generated. So everything that you see on here is built on demand. There's not hard-coded stuff in here. This is because all of this is built on demand. And by on demand means we have React components that interact with our REST APIs and with DominoDB and give us, for example, the design of a certain application. So for our demo, we're going to be looking at the SIT Kanban sample, which is, if I go to my notes application, show you notes application first, we'll leave that one. And this is the sample application that we have, right? So there's, for example, is a view that's rendered by state. You see, this is a categorized view, and it sorts the documents in a certain categorization, and has an index line and a couple of items in here as well. Now, what happens is when I open up this application in the browser, which is that one here, we see exactly the same stuff. This is a notes view rendered in the browser, and what I can quickly do here, and this is something that I like personally very much, I can rebuild this categorized view quickly, right? So I just categorize the view down here, and I want to move the index line up here, change the sorting. There it looks pretty much the way that we saw it in the notes application, right? So this is something you can do in a React application. So these are React components right here that handle all of this in your view. But of course, I want to look at this, and I want to use this as a Kanban board. That's not the way I want to share this. So why don't I switch over to the by state view here? And this renders a completely different view. This renders this as a Kanban board, right? And what I want to do now is I want to add a new entry to this board, which is for today. And the entry would be live from CollabSphere. It's me, it's going to be responsible for this. And for the sake of the demo, that's okay. And we have it right here, right? So now I can use that one, and I should be able to use that one and drag it over. Of course, it's not working today. Okay. Now I have to save the board first, right? So, and after that, I should be able, no, it's not. Okay, I'll take another one. And I can move those things over and drag them around. Move things over here. So I can change those things and save those boards. And if you go back to the notes database now and see what happened, and we should see some changes in this view. And you see that there's these two documents that I just created. I unintentionally copied the one. So there's a copy action that's available here. So these are the ones that I just created, and which are available now in the browser on this one over here. And if I did it again, so there's a copy trick on that. But that's basically the way I can handle data like this in a relatively simple way and interact with this application and do changes, save them as changes, and they get related back to the notes application. So, and as I said, this application got created. What does that mean? Well, in the back end of this application, there's a repository, and this repository here is a notes application that defines all the web applications that are available that I can use. And also what we have here is we have all the design elements that you see in this application. So we read the design documents, And if you go, for example, to the Kanban sample down here, which is that one, I can go to a view, and this view by state. You can see there's a definition in here that allows me to say this is a Kanban view. So this is the only thing that I need to do. So I go in and I read in the design, I do some changes, I do some attributes for it. For example, in this thing here, I define that this is a Kanban status column in this view that we have. And everything else, when I work with this application and the application gets opened, and I open up this by state view, the rendering takes place due to the fact that we changed this design in the backend. So there's no hard-coded things in here. So we read the design, read the data, and we mix it together and generate this view. And of course, we can do a lot more of those things.
Heiko, we're at 11:45, so we should.
Yeah, I'm stopping right here. So same issue like this. You can build map views in that manner. This is also view data, or documented from a nodes database rendered in those things. And all of this more or less without coding a single line in the front end application. This is all generated code, right? So that's maybe back to the slides. This is the full-blown implementation of what you can do and what you can achieve if you really work with these technologies. There's a fantastic new world out there that's waiting for us to be adopted. And of course, we can help you with that. So if you want to get started with this, Graham and I and Colin and C3G, we sat down and tried to make it a little bit easier for you to get started. So we built a course on Google Classroom. The URL is there. It's c3gca.com/education. And this should give you a head start on how to set up the AppDevPack and how to get the first steps, the first baby steps, walking with it, and how to set it up and run it. Including IAM, including security, and all of those kind of things.
I was just going to add the thing about IAM. We've had a question about security. So the IAM server, which is the OAuth server, is the piece that gives us full Domino security for all of our applications. Basically, what you have to do is authenticate against the Domino directory, and at that point, your Notes application, your JavaScript or Java application respects full Notes security the way we all know and love it. So this is over 5 hours worth of videos, 50 some odd. It's broken into modules, starting right from how to install Domino 11, installing the AppDevPack, writing code, doing additional installations and configuration, writing more code. And as we say, we've got a second one on the go. Mike, maybe you can jump back in here and let us know how much time we've got, because I know the next presentation is going to want to come up reasonably quick. So we'll try and cram in as many questions as we can. The first question comes from somebody that just says attendee, but it says, is the IAM service a separate thing from Proton? And the answer is yes. But then the secondary question, and Heiko, maybe you can jump in here. It says, can you install and run IAM just for OAuth, say to an Xpages application, without having to run Proton?
No, currently not, because the background for this is that IAM uses a Nodes database to store its credentials and its tokens that it issues for the OAuth requests, and that by itself uses DominoDB and Proton to interact with the Domino server. So you need the full implementation of Domino and Proton to go with that.
So Steve Loaz had a bunch of questions in the chat that I wanted to address. The main question is back and forth about the fact that it's a JSON object that is provided by the AppDevPack to your application. And he's thinking about Java in particular, and having to do that translation. So if there was a Java object, the question is, we cannot simply send a Java object to be persisted in Domino without something in the middle to translate it to a document or a response document.
Let me follow up on that.
Colin actually jumped in there. So it says, typically in the relational world, you would use a REST API to translate to an intermediate object storage, and from there to an ORM or JDBC API directly. This is a similar concept. Different document and OrientDBs will each work a little bit differently.
Yes.
We have about a minute left because we need to
Yeah, of course.
Right.
set up the next meeting.
Well, clearly this is something that we should be talking about. So please send us your feedback. Maybe what we can do is have an open forum on C3UG or another medium and carry the conversation on, because we want people talking about it. So I see some feedback here. Mike Zen says that the course helped out tremendously in helping set everything up. So I appreciate you taking the time to go through that. By all means, please reach out to us. You know how to get in touch with us. Our contact information is on the screen there. We're happy to talk about this more and share that feedback with HCL as well. Appreciate it, folks. Enjoy the rest of the conference.